Okay, good day sa lahat. So, in this video, we will have an example for spring problems. Okay, so let us consider this figure for this problem. Okay, so a horizontal spring weighing 10 kilograms has a spring constant K is equal to 200 Newton meter. Determine the force when it is pulled 0.25 meters from equilibrium, the work required to reach the same length, the period, the angular frequency of motion, the frequency of motion, the maximum or minimum velocity and acceleration, and the velocity and acceleration after 2.5 seconds. Okay? So let us consider this figure. So ito yung figure natin. So as you can see, ito yung original length niya. Kumbaga, here. So kung hindi nyo makita, so natin, i-highlight natin. So this is the original L, and then merong it is being pulled to the right for 0.25 meters. Okay? So we don't need to worry dahil hindi natin kailangan alamin kung ano yung original length ng spring na to. Okay? What we only need is the following. Okay? So for letter A, hahanapin natin yung force when it is pulled 0.25 m equilibrium. And then, okay, so the formula, okay, so for those who have not yet hindi pa nakita yung lecture video, so ilalagay ko yung lecture video sa comment section. So, tingnan nyo na lang kung paano dinerive yung mga formulas. Okay? In part 1 or part 2. Okay? For oscillation and mechanical waves. So from those videos, kapag okay, sa mga nakapanood ng previous 2 videos, we have derived the formula for the force of spring as negative kx. Okay? Dahil yung negative kasi the spring tends to counteract the force in which it is being pulled. Okay? Pag pinul mo siya ng F to the right, magkakaroon ng internal force in order to counteract that force. So, basically, kaya negative. Okay? So, yan. So, yung negative K natin is obviously ito. So, this is the negative K. Okay, so gamitin natin yan. So, negative K is negative 200 Newton meter times this 0.25 meter. So, after that, okay, i-multiply natin. So, yung result will be F is equal to negative 50 Newton. So, ganito lang kasimple. So, ito yung sagot for letter A. Okay, so for letter B, the work required to reach the same length. Okay, so ganito lang din yan. So, usually, yung work or the U is equivalent, okay, to actually, it is equivalent to the force dx. But somehow, for this particular problem, pwede mo nang gamitin kaagad itong formula na to. So, negative 1/2 kx squared. Okay? So, therefore, negative 1/2 times k, 200 Newton per meter, multiplied by 0.25 meter squared. So, U will be 0.25 squared, 0.0625. So it will become negative 6.25 Newton per Newton meter, or negative 6.25 joules. So this is the answer. Okay? So check muna natin. Baka magkamali tayo. So tama. Ito yung sagot. Yan. So letter C is the period. Okay. So paano natin computein yung period? Okay, so kuha muna tayo ng bagong board. Another board, I mean. So maybe, okay. So yan. Okay, so dito na lang siguro natin isolve, okay? So maybe we will just erase this first two. Okay? So since nakuha na natin F equals negative 50 Newton, B is equal to negative 6.25 Newton meter. So since nakuha na natin, since video naman ito, pwede nyong ulitin dun sa part na nalagay ko yung sagot. Okay, so here. So, the period, the angular frequency, and the frequency of motion. So first, ano bang kailangan nating, ano ba yung, okay, ano ba yung mga formulas na applicable dito. Okay? So first, ang una nating pwedeng masagutan dito is yung angular frequency. So if you can remember what is the formula for angular frequency, okay, so erase ko muna to. Hindi natin na kailangan to. So when we say angular frequency, unahin muna natin yung D, angular frequency. So from the spring problems, for spring problems, okay, doon sa na-explain ko to nung part 2 ng oscillation and mechanical waves introduction, okay? So the angular frequency or the omega, so this is the angular frequency. So the angular frequency is actually equivalent to square root of K over M. So ang K dito is ito, and then divided by kay mass. So kailangan na natin ilagay dyan. So i-plug in dito na formula. So 200 Newton meter over 10 kilograms. So therefore, yung omega natin or yung angular frequency natin is 200 Newton meter over 10 kilograms. So ang makuha natin dito is in radian per second. So without further ado, sagutan na natin. So 200 divide 10 is 20. Square root of that one will be 4.472. So ganun lang kadali. Radian per second. So yan yung sagot. So pulahin natin. Ito yung sagot. 4.472 radian per second. And then the next The next, we can solve here. Is actually, dito pa lang natin pwede gamitin si period. And then when we say period, okay, nauna yata si D kaysa kay C. So, kay period, which is T, we could use T is equivalent to 2 pi over omega. So, yan lang. Yung omega is yung angular frequency. Okay, so this is the period. So, the T or the period is equal to 2 pi over omega. So, 2 pi over 4.472. Okay? So, I advise you na kung ano yung kinalabasan sa calculator mula dito, para less errors tayo is idiretso mo na. So, gamitin mo yung whole decimal places para konti lang yung error. So, 2 shift pi divided by yung answer kanina is equal to 1.405. Okay, so the period is 1.05 seconds. Okay? So, ito yung sagot. This is the period. This is the angular frequency and this is for the period. Okay. So, here we go. So, nakuha na natin si angular frequency tsaka si period. So, doon tayo sa frequency of motion. So, here. Okay? So, since wala tayong, because we lack space, so maybe, i-erase muna natin tong D. O since si angular frequency is actually different from, okay? So, mind you lang yung angular frequency at saka si frequency, hindi sila actually magkatulad. Si angular frequency is si omega in radian per second. Samantalang yung frequency is in revolution per second. Okay? Angular frequency is in radian per second, while the frequency lang, yung frequency lang talaga, walang angular, is in revolution per second. Okay? But somehow, we can actually use either period or the angular frequency to get that one. Okay? So, erase muna natin to. Okay? So, since video ito, pwede nyong balikan kung kailangan natin sinagutan yung part ng problem na yun. Okay, so here. So, unahin natin. Letter E. So, yung frequency is F. Is actually, pwede siyang ganito. W over 2 pi. Pwede mong gamitin si omega or W yung forma over 2 pi or 1 over T. So, it's just the inverse over T. So, but somehow, you can get it in revolution per second. So, this is the frequency. Revolution per second. Okay, so technically speaking, okay, so we just, okay, so we compute. So, 1 over T. So, ang pinakamadali is i-inverse mo si T. So, 1 divided by 1.405. So, we get 0.712 revolution per second. So, yan yung kay frequency, letter E. Okay. So, here. So, what is the maximum or the minimum velocity? Okay, sa F tayo. So, the maximum minimum velocity and acceleration. Okay. So, from the previous video again, so, nandun din yung formulas. Actually, nasa part 2, nasa part 2 yung mga formulas. Okay, so, ilalagay ko dito sa comment section yung mga videos na sinasabi ko. Okay? So, for those who have not seen the previous 2 videos, para malaman nyo kung saan dinerive yung mga formulas. Okay? So, inisin na natin to. Diretso tayo sa F. So, the maximum and minimum velocity. So, here. Okay? So, to those who have not, okay? So, ito yung formulas na na-derive natin doon sa nakaraang video. So, for the max, okay, for the Vmax or Vmin, dalawa yan eh. Okay, so depending on how do you, in your perspective, pag sinabi nating maximum, we are talking about in terms of positive and negative. So here, ang positive natin is the maximum and the negative here is minimum. So ibig sabihin yung maximum at saka minimum value ng velocity is, their difference is the sign. So we say that the maximum is the positive and the minimum is the negative. So here, the Vmax is equals to omega times the A. And please remember that the maximum amplitude, okay? So, review muna tayo Okay pa, the maximum amplitude is equivalent to, the maximum amplitude is, okay, A max actually yan. Omega times A max. So, the A max actually is the X. Okay, so if you remember in the previous video, okay, so review muna tayo kung bakit ganito yung formula. Okay, so actually ganito yan eh. Okay, parang ganito. Okay, so if you draw the oscillation, okay, we are talking about oscillation of spring. Ito yung graph niya in terms of T and in terms of the displacement. Okay? So here at the y-axis, at the vertical axis I mean, is the x. So itong displacement. Okay, so this is time and this is displacement. So as you can see here, for simple oscillation, this is actually simple harmonic oscillation. Yung maximum natin is ito. Ito yung maximum natin, A max. So yung A max natin dito sa taas at dito sa ibaba, isa lang. And this A max is equivalent to the X. Okay? So meron kasi as time pass by, may mga portion dito na yung A is nandito. Minsan nandito sa ibaba. So ang isa is positive, ang isa is negative. So ang A max na to is positive, dito sa ibaba is negative. So kaya nagkaganito yung formula, if you remember. So ito yung pinakamataas na displacement niya at the positive side. And then ito yung pinakamalaking displacement niya on the negative side. So kaya yung maximum velocity is positive at saka yung minimum velocity is negative. But somehow they have the same answer. They have the same absolute value, but somehow they have different sign. Kaya ganon, okay? So that's just a little review from the previous video. Okay, na nailalagay ko dito sa comment section. Okay, so therefore, A max is equal to X. Okay, so without further ado, so i-multiply mo lang yan. So B max or V min is equivalent to the omega, which is, the omega here is 4.472, okay? Or we can say the square root of 20. Nung nakaraan, 4.472. Yun. The omega, positive and negative. Okay? So this is actually square root of 200 over 10 or square root of 20. So this is the square root of 20 in terms of 3 decimal places. But I use the square root here in the computation, kaya medyo different yung sagot nyo, sagot ko. Kaya I prefer to use the with the longer, with many decimal places. So 4.472 approximately, or the square root of 20 times the A max. So the A max here is the X, which is 0.25 meters, because okay, so 0.25. Kaya yung B max natin or V min is equivalent to 1. Is approximately positive or negative 1.118 meter per second. So yan yung sagot. Okay, so ano yung maximum at saka minimum dito? Ang maximum velocity is 1.118 meter per second, positive. Yung minimum naman is yung negative, 1.118. Okay? So without further ado, punta tayo dun sa acceleration. Okay? So acceleration naman tayo. Okay? So sa F pa rin to. Okay? So here. Pagpatuloy natin yung simula natin. So we know that V, okay? So kung ito yung formula ng Vmax, ito naman yung acceleration maximum. Okay? Pero dito, positive and negative omega squared times A max. Okay. So ito yung formula. A maximum or minimum. So yung positive, yung maximum, saka yung negative, yung minimum. So equivalent siya. So positive, negative. So yung omega is 4.472. Okay? Squared times the A max. The A max is 0.25 meters. At ito in terms of radian per second. So, ang resulta niyan is in meter per second squared. Okay? So, since 4.470 is square root of 20 actually, square root of 200 over 10 is 20, square root of that one is the omega or the angular frequency, or the angular frequency squared times A max, or you may say just the X. So therefore, the answer is 20. 4.472 squared is 20 times 0.25 is 5. So the answer is 5 meter per positive, negative, 5 meter per second squared. So ito yung sagot natin. Okay, so saan yung maximum at minimum dito? Yung maximum is yung positive, saka yung minimum is negative. Okay, pareho sila ng value, pero magkaiba sila ng sign. Yung isa, pataas, yung isa pababa na acceleration. So, yan yung okay, so that is our answer for letter F. Okay. So, without further ado, punta tayo sa G. Okay. So, ito yung controversial dito. Okay. Okay. So, erase muna natin to dahil wala tayong space. Okay. So, yan. So, punta tayo sa G. Okay. So, yung G natin, hinahanap natin yung velocity and acceleration. When time is 2.5 seconds. Okay. So, punta muna tayo dun sa isang board. Okay. So, ito yung representative natin na drawing kanina. So, yung ginawa natin kanina. So, para mas maintindihan natin, so ito yung displacement, ito yung time. Okay. So, in between that, okay, between these two crests, we have the T. Okay, so if you remember, that T is, okay, na-explain ko to in the previous video, the T is the period or the allotted time in which na mabuo niya yung isang cycle. Okay, when we say cycle, ito yung difference na pareho at that time na naabot niya yung maximum na crest at yung isa is naabot niya yung maximum na crest sa baba at sa ilalim. So, ito yung T. So, in other words, na-complete niya yung isang cycle. Okay? So, yan yung T. Okay? So, yan yung T. In which, nabuo niya yung isang cycle or in 2 pi in 1 revolution. So, here, that T, as we have previously computed, is equivalent to 1. The T here is 1.405 seconds. So, ito yung nakuha natin kanina na T. So, yan yung value ng T, 1.405 seconds. So, ito yung T pag galing siya sa maximum value o sa tinatawag nating crest at the top at dito sa crest sa bottom kung saan bumalik siya sa kanyang bumalik siya sa the same point. So, yan yung T. Pwede mo ring sukatin yung T mula dito, okay, until the time na nabuo niya yung na bumalik siya sa original position niya. From here to here. Okay? In a sense na this is one cycle, this is one cycle, and this is one cycle. And it took 1.0405 seconds to complete that cycle. But somehow, okay, relative to the problem, okay, so balikan natin, which is velocity and acceleration after 2.5 seconds. So, okay, it's just a review class, guys. Okay, so para hindi nyo, to reinforce your memory on the subject matter, okay? Mas importante kasi yan, okay? So here, meron tayong, if naalala nyo pa, yung formula ng velocity and acceleration. So in the previous, so this following are actually the general formula for the velocity and acceleration. So here, the velocity and acceleration, the general formula for this is this velocity is equivalent to um, okay, so the velocity is equal to negative omega amplitude. Okay, so this is the amplitude times sine omega t plus phi. But here, we can assume, okay, that phi is equal to 0. And also here, the acceleration is omega squared a cosine omega t plus phi. But somehow, for this problem, for springs, phi is 0. Okay? Tandaan nyo yan. For springs, phi is 0. But mayroong mga pagkakataon na hindi siya nasa 0. But if it is not given, you assume that phi is 0. Okay? So, yan. So, without further ado, gamitin na natin to. But please take note na kapag, okay? But please take note na wala na tong phi. So, 0 na siya. So, magiging negative omega a sine omega t. Okay? So, without further ado, i-apply na natin tong mga formulas na to sa problem. So, what is the velocity and acceleration at t is equal to 2.5 seconds? So, this is the solution. So, we use v is equal to omega a okay? So, omega a cos a sine omega t. Okay? So, yan yung velocity. Okay. So, for this case, it will be negative okay. So, please take note that it should be in region. Okay, take note lang. So, this will be in this formulas is in region. Okay, region dapat to. So, para hindi tayo magkamali. Okay? So, region. So, negative omega, okay, times, which is 4.472, or you can use square root of 20 para mas accurate, okay? You can use square root of 20. The amplitude is obviously 0.25. Ito is equal to the amplitude. Sine square root of 20 times the time. The time here is 2.5 seconds. So please be sure na region to region mode. So sine, sir. Okay, the amplitude is 0.25. Sorry, hindi ko na 0.25. So here, I computed that the velocity here is positive 1.099 meter per second. So ito yung sagot natin. This is the answer for the velocity. Okay, at t is equal to 2.5 seconds. Kay acceleration naman is negative omega squared a cosine of omega t. Okay? Cosine at, okay. So, negative square root of 20, yung 4.472 kanina is square root of 20 supposed to be yun, yung exact. So, 0.25 times cosine square root of 20 times the time, 2.5. Okay? Please take note na yung gagamitin mo lang is in radian mode. Okay? Kapag hindi radian mode yung ginamit mo, dito, mali yung sagot mo. Okay. So, the answer that I get is negative. Negative 0.919 meter per second squared. So, ito yung nakuha kong sagot. So, this is the same at t is equal to 2.5 seconds. Okay, so check muna natin para hindi tayo magkamali. Okay. Okay, tama yung sagot natin. Negative 0.919 meter per second squared. Okay? So, yan. So, actually, paalala lang, this is usually a cosine. So, mas tama siguro kung dito nagsimula. Yung x. Okay? So, it is actually a cosine. A cosine function in which it is traveling at omega or angular frequency. Okay? So, ito yung mga sagot natin. 1.099 meter per second at t is equal to 2.5 seconds and a is equal to negative 0.919 meter per second squared at t is equal to 2.5 seconds. So, yan. Yan yung mga yun yung sagot natin. Okay? So, I hope may natutunan kayo. Okay? From this video. Okay? So, ilalagay ko sa comment section yung mga previous videos na pwede ninyong that I would advise na panoorin nyo para mas maintindihan nyo yung topic na to. Okay? So, thank you for listening.